there is sound.
In real, people cannot do like that because people have to live their life and people have to think about the future.
Це ми зараз ми печемо хліб тут недалеко від нас. А зараз ми будемо робити art piece. Art piece of bread. Ja myślę, że to jest bardzo symboliczne, że teraz przeskakuję z mowy na mowу. Я думаю, що це дуже символічно зробити з хліба щось, що може бути з нами довше, ніж просто хліб. Хоча з нами хліб дуже давно теж. І ми зробили тісто, котре не дуже надається до з'їдення, з того, щоб його з'їсти, але дуже надається до того, щоб щось з нього зліпити. І ось таке прикольно. І ми будемо зараз робити. Ось так от. До побачення.
Стабільності в Україні залежить стабільність сьогодні.
Просто будуються міста.
In real, people cannot do like that because people have to live their life and people have to think about the future.
Last year when I came back from Paris, I was very inspired to...
Can you hear me?
Hold. Check.
Стабільності в Україні залежить стабільність сьогодні. Стабільності в Україні залежить стабільність сьогодні.
Просто будуються міста.
In real, people cannot do like that because people have to live their life and people have to think about the future.
Last year when I came back from Paris, I was very inspired to...
Can you hear me?
Hold. Check.
Стабільності в Україні залежить стабільність сьогодні. Стабільності в Україні залежить стабільність сьогодні.
Просто будуються міста.
In real, people cannot do like that because people have to live their life and people have to think about the future.
Last year when I came back from...
Compared to others, your ranking is low. This one? No, this one. No, this one. Maybe put it low. Okay. Compared to others, your ranking is low. This makes you sad. This makes you sad. This makes you sad. it's real. Stop. The heart is frozen. Kronos hurts. Anything anymore. Anything anymore. Anything anymore. Anything anymore makes you sad.
А тепер давай, стакан води. Важко це робити, Леночка. Треба якось так. Я не хочу себе пиздити. Що ще? Які ще смішні звуки може робити мікрофон? Ні, треба ділей. Типа шмяк какашки 10-го етажа.
Коли я прокинувся? Коли мені було 13. 13-й минало. Ну. Never again. 2.0. Sustainable Peace Manifesto. Executive summary. Ukraine seeks to fulfill its potential as a European democracy built on the principles of the rule of law. This will only be possible after the invasion is over. The liberation of the entire territory of Ukraine and the end of hostilities will not bring an end to the war. And it is not only a matter of reparations for the damage caused to the country and punishing the guilty. Feverish anti-Ukrainian and anti-Western sentiment in tandem with the imperial ambitions of both the Russian elite and ordinary Russians will sooner or later lead to future escalation and war. To protect Ukraine and the world from new waves of aggression, the anti-war coalition needs to create conditions that will result in profound internal changes in Russia to ensure sustainable peace. Compelled by the calls of our defenders, the armed forces of Ukraine, we, the authors of this manifesto, and representatives of Ukrainian civil society, have taken the liberty of detaining these conditions. The world will never be the same as it was before the war. So instead of returning to the pre-war status quo, our goal is to look at what we made and what made the war possible, and create a new, safer system that will completely rule out further Russian aggression down the line. Most of our proposals are within the framework of international law, and some seek legal changes that are commensurate with new threats to global security. This manifesto offers a vision of such as a post-war world and how to achieve it. We cannot achieve peace at the expense of justice or justice at the expense of peace. For sustainable international security, justice and peace must be achieved simultaneously. This means that the aggressor must bear full responsibility for the war and be held fully accountable. War criminals must be punished for their aggression, for their war crimes, for their crimes against humanity and genocide, and for inciting hatred, which led to a war that was previously unthinkable in the 21st century. Not all losses can be compensated. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. Millions have lost their loved ones. Tens of millions have lost years and years of their lives. But all material damage must be properly appraised and compensation paid, and all losses should be compensated to the maximum extent possible. Russia must suffer a loss of status. It should not be allowed to influence international politics through international organizations. An aggressor cannot be a member of the UN Security Council, whose core mission is to guarantee peace. Russia's withdrawal from Ukraine must be recognized the priority of the interest of Ukrainian society and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. All legislation enacted in the occupied territories must be made null and void. Ukraine is entitled not only to demand justice for the crimes committed by Russia, but also to receive unambiguous guarantees of sustainable peace in the future. Ukraine's accession to the European Union and NATO is the #1 prerequisite for sustainable peace. Western societies must cast aside their stereotypes about Russian grandeur as nurtured by Russian propaganda over the centuries, fueling its imperial aggression and colonial policies towards neighboring countries. Russia must bring its constitutional system, social structure and political systems in line with modern-day standards, debunking the concept of Ruski Mir, the Russian world, will create the conditions for the further transformation of public consciousness that will drive the decolonization of the country. The process of de-Russiization must begin by vanishing its imperial historical memory, meaning Russia must reject ideas of its historical exceptionalism as a separate civilization and notion of its supremacy, as well as its territorial claims to neighboring countries. The international community should demand the demilitarization and denuclearization of the Russian Federation to reduce the risk of future aggression. Abandoning Russian energy will deprive Russia of the opportunity to use it as a weapon and accelerate the transition to green energy. We, the authors of this manifesto and representatives of Ukrainian civil society, believe that the implementation of the ideas herein will prevent future aggression and ensure sustainable peace in the interest of all people, not only in West Europe, but also in Central and Eastern Europe, through the motto, "Never again." Contents: responsibility for the war, punishment for crimes of aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, compensation for material and moral damage caused to Ukraine by Russian aggression, isolation, expulsion and downgrading of the status of the Russian Federation in international organizations, strategy for Russia's withdrawal from its war, ensuring sustainable peace, Ukraine's membership in the European Union and NATO, 2. Intrinsically linked decisions, overcoming stereotypes and Russian lobbying regarding Ukraine in Western politics, decolonization of Russia, and overcoming Russian totalitarianism, overcoming the past, decolonization of Russian history and information policy, disarmament of the Russian Federation, changing the global energy balance and rescue-based approach to the economy as a contributor to sustainable peace. We don't know how long the war will last. One thing, however, is certain. Each day brings it closer to the end. The time has come for both Ukraine and the world to answer the question of what this end will look like. We are driven to do this because the world is still bogged down in outdated concepts, and there is no opposition in Russia that can offer a vision of the future. It's a fool's errand to try and predict exactly how the war will end, but it is obvious that the worst case scenario has already been averted. There will be no defeat of Ukraine and its erasure from the world map. With the support of the volunteer movement and the entire free world, the armed forces of Ukraine have ensured that this scenario will not come to reality. It is clear that Russia's defeat and decline is much more likely than the conquest of Ukraine. We are also well aware that an armistice will not bring an end to the war. Given the strong anti-Ukrainian sentiment and imperial ambitions among both the Russian elite and ordinary Russians, any truce will not only bring a respite and will be an invitation for a new Russian war against Ukraine, just as the truce at the end of the first Russian-Chechen war was followed by another war, one even more destructive and cruel. The only acceptable scenario for Ukrainians and the democratic world is the victory of Ukraine and its development as a democratic European state based on the rule of law and respect for human rights. But what does victory look like? Obviously, the advance of the armed forces of Ukraine to the borders of 1991 is necessary, but if Russia keeps pushing its aggressive plans, more is required. How can we protect Ukraine and the world from the next war? How can we avert a scenario when in 1 or 2 generations a new Putin comes to power in Moscow, unleashing a new Russian war against Ukraine and the West? A war our children and grandchildren will be forced to fight. We shall proceed from the assumption that the victories of the armed forces of Ukraine and the front lines, combined with the international isolations of Russia and Western sanctions, will lead to the collapse of Putin's regime. However, we firmly believe that the Ukrainian victory will not be complete unless there is an international transformation of Russia that would render any subsequent Russian aggression against Ukraine or other countries impossible. It must be said loud and clear. The Russians themselves are not capable of making these changes. The Russian Federation is too ill for it to be able to cure itself. There have been many attempts to create a democratic Russia throughout its history, but each one ended with an even longer period of authoritarian and totalitarian rule, mass repressions against its own population, and aggressive policies towards its neighbors. Russia itself cannot break free from the vicious circle of its past. It can change only under international pressure. And this is where Ukrainian voices should be heard. We, Ukrainians, deserve no less. This right stems from our staunch opposition to Russian aggression, which poses a threat to the entire world. As a result of our past and present experience, we have become the foremost experts of the Russian issue. We know very well that the Russian threat goes beyond Lenin, Stalin or Putin. We are a major stakeholder in the transformation of Russia as an essential factor for achieving sustainable peace in the world. We, the authors of this manifesto and representatives of Ukrainian civil society, have taken the liberty of describing how such victory would look. It was written with 3 audiences in mind. Firstly, our fellow Ukrainians, we must be clear about what victory would look like to protect future generations from war and genocide. The second audience is our international partners and allies in the fight against Russian aggression. We are grateful to them for all their help and assistance. Without our partners, our future victory will be impossible. But we want them to be aware of their moral duty to Ukraine. With their willingness to sacrifice their lives for the sake of freedom and dignity, Ukrainians are reminding our allies of their own values, which have been diluted in recent decades as a result of the pragmatic attitude towards business ties with Russia and other authoritarian regimes. The third audience is all those people in Russia and in exile that seek this transformation, primarily the oppressed non-Russian people of the empire, people fighting against Putin's regime and other non-imperial Russians. To some, these people may seem weak compared to Putin's regime, but they are the ones who will have to put in the actual work. Rather than returning to the status quo before the beginning of the invasion, our goal is to create a new, safer world where such aggression is impossible, and proactive countermeasures are taken to ensure that this remains the case. Most of our proposals are within the framework of international law, while others require legal changes that are commensurate with the new threats to global security. In this manifesto, we will also attempt to convey another important idea. One cannot achieve peace at the expense of justice, or justice at the expense of peace. For sustainable international security, justice and peace must be achieved simultaneously. This manifesto does not address the issue of the decolonization of the territories occupied by the Russian Empire of the post-war geopolitical distribution of power. These are important issues that require a separate analysis. Since the First World War, the fate of this world have largely depended on what was happening in and around Ukraine. Every attempt to ignore Ukrainian voices in the past ended in disaster for both Ukraine and the world. Ukrainians have become agents of history, and therefore the world should understand that the principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine is here to stay. Otherwise, not only Ukrainians but the whole world will pay a high price for ignoring Ukraine. Only our security will enable Ukraine, Europe and the world to address the greatest challenges facing humanity. Responsibility for the war. Russian society today is unable to recognize its collective guilt either for the war, whose criminal nature is very obvious to most outside observers, or for its consequences. The vast majority of the population, being staunch believers in the imperialist grandeur of Russia, easily fall under the influence of official propaganda narratives about the so-called protection of the people of the Donbass and the artificially of Ukrainian statehood, that the Ukrainian people do not exist because Russians and Ukrainians are one and the same, and about the need to protect Russia from NATO aggression. And those opposed to the Russian regime consider themselves to be victims of Putin's policies, just like Ukrainians. Future coexistence based on sustainable peace is impossible without a change in the public consciousness of Russians. Post-war reparations should be seen as rectifying an obvious injustice rather than punishing an entire nation for the decisions of one individual. The issue of accountability for war crimes against Ukraine therefore carries enormous weight as a tool for building sustainable peace and restoring justice in a legitimate way. There are three categories of criminal acts that require proper legal assessment: crimes of aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and incitement of genocide. The first is an attack on a sovereign state with the aim of capturing its territory and establishing control over it, as well as erasing its cultural and national identity. Russia's actions have already received the appropriate political assessment from many international institutions, but there are currently no legal accountability mechanisms. Neither Russia nor Ukraine has ratified the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court with the Kampala amendments. And Russia systematically abuses its rights to veto in the UN Security Council, obstructing the jurisdiction of the ICC. In response of this, Ukraine proposed to set up a separate temporary international tribunal for crimes of aggression. This can be established on the basis of an agreement between individual states or by decision of an international organization, the UN, or regional organizations, the Council of Europe and the European Union. The key objective is to maximize the legitimacy of the accountability mechanism and facilities to exemption from immunity of the highest officials of aggressor country. The actions of Russian leaders should be regarded as crimes against the peace and security of mankind, and the accountability mechanism should constitute the response of the international community rather than the individual states. Subject to the consolidation of the political will of many countries, and International Criminal Court could be granted jurisdiction to making procedural amendments to the Rome Statute of the ICC. For example, by providing for the possibility of addressing the United Nations General Assembly. But this could take decades. Any mechanism requires a broad international consciousness, and its creation is now a priority. It is important that the accountability mechanism is effective, legitimate, and ensures that the highest official of the aggressor country see justice. Compensation for the material and moral damage caused to Ukraine by the Russian Federation. Russia must pay for the war. It has unleashed and compensate Ukraine for material and moral damage. For this to happen, countries and international organizations should adopt a framework at the international and national levels to carry out an objective assessment of the damage caused to Ukraine and full payment of compensation by Russian Federation. According to the Ukrainian government, as of the beginning of 2023, Ukraine's direct material losses from the invasion alone have reached 700 billion United States dollar and continue to grow daily. Indirect material damages, primarily lost economic momentum and the ability to work of millions of people, as well as future medical and social spending, have yet to be assessed. Moreover, the moral damage is unprecedented. Ukraine is entitled to demand compensation for the victims of the war and their families. Since the outset of the invasion, more than 300 billion euros have been frozen from the currency reserves of the Central Bank of Russia under Western sanctions. The use of these funds as compensation for the Ukrainian losses would be a logical step forward, although this requires changes to legislation and political courage from the US and European Union countries, where these funds are held. However, their imminent confiscation in favor of Ukraine looks unlikely, as long as there is a theoretical possibility that the Russian Federation will agree to pay voluntary compensation to Ukraine at the end of the war. Until then, the frozen funds can serve as a security deposit for Ukraine. Another source of compensation would be funds of private companies and individuals associated with Putin's regime. The process of freezing such funds was initiated immediately after the onset of the invasion and is ongoing. The international compensation mechanism can address the problem in two ways. First one, the Russian Federation agrees to reparations at the end of the war and voluntarily cooperates in devising and implementing a reparations formula. Second one, Russia does not agree with the assessment of the damage caused and the proposed ways of voluntary compensation, in which case reparations should be made via the seizure and transfer to Ukraine of frozen Russian assets. Separately, there is the issue of the immediate return of people forcibly removed from Ukraine, stolen and illegally adopted children who should be returned unconditionally to their legal guardians in Ukraine without delay. Items of cultural value and archives stolen from Ukraine must be also immediately and unconditionally returned. isolation and downgrading of the status of the Russian Federation. In its resolutions, aggression against Ukraine, dated 2nd March 2022, humanitarian consequences of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, dated 24 March 2022, and suspension of membership rights of the Russian Federation in the Human Rights Council, dated 7 April 2022. The UN General Assembly recognized that the Russian Federation committed aggression against Ukraine, violating Article 2 of the UN Charter, which prohibits UN members from using force against the territorial integrity or political independence of other states. The actions of the Russian Federation disqualify it as a peace-loving state, which is the main criterion for membership in the UN and in other international organizations. Therefore, all international organizations should adopt results of the exclusion, suspension, or limitation of the membership rights of Russian Federation. The priority should be to strip Russia of its seat on the UN Security Council and the UN as a whole as soon as possible. Ukraine's official position is that the gross and unprecedented violation of the UN Charter, which has been ongoing since 1999, when the Russian Federation bypassed the UN Charter procedure to inherit the seat of the USSR in the UN, should be rectified. In December 1991, this happened with the tacit consent of the member state of the Security Council and the UN Secretariat, thereby limiting the rights of all other UA member states to have their say on the matter through the General Assembly voting procedure, as provided for in Article 4 of the UN Charter. Moreover, in clear contravention of the UN Charter, the Russian Federation usurped a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. As a result, Russia is now able to obstruct the actions of the UN Security Council, resort to nuclear and food security blackmail, and evade responsibility for its crimes, not only in Ukraine, but also in Georgia, Chechnya, Syria, Africa, and so on. This means that to achieve its goals of supporting international peace and security and to restore respect for its charter, the United Nations should resolve to remove the Russian Federation as a permanent member of the UN Security Council and withdraw or suspend the Russian Federation's membership in the UN and accordingly in its specialized institutions and programs, such as, in particular, UNESCO. In the future, when Russia re-embraced the rules of the civilized world, it can reacquire the rights of an ordinary member of the UN on general terms, in accordance with the procedure laid down in the Charter. However, it cannot be granted permanent membership in the UN Security Council again. Until the UN Charter is reformed, which is a very complex issue, the USSR seat on the Security Council should remain vacant. As a result of the significant violation of the member state obligations, the OSCE should suspend Russia and apply following the Yugoslav precedent in 1992. Russia and its citizens should be also excluded from all OSCE bodies and missions. The Council of Europe excluded Russia in March 2022. The Council of Europe will not greenlight Russia's return until it fulfills all the membership criteria, in particular regarding the proper implementation of the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms and other key conventions of the Council of Europe, as well as the recognition of the primacy of decisions adopted by the European Court of Human Rights. The G20 should decide to completely boycott or refuse to invite Russia to summits and other meetings in the G20 format until it chases its aggression and provides full compensation for the damage caused. International economic organizations and financial institutions, a number of Western countries have revoked Russia's most favored nation status under the WTO. The World Bank has suspended all its programs in Russia. This is not enough. All international institutions must agree on Russia's expulsion, suspension of membership, or restriction of rights until the latter cases its aggression and provides full compensation for the damage caused. Strategy for Russia's withdrawal from its war in Ukraine. The strategy for Russia's withdrawal from its war in Ukraine after its military defeat should focus on the mitigation of the consequences of Russian aggression in a fair manner, giving unconditional priority to the interests of Ukrainian society and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Due to the irreparable human losses, the mass migration of millions of Ukrainian citizens and damage to its demographic, economy and critical infrastructure, Ukraine is entitled not only to expect repentance and atonement on the part of Russian citizens, but also to demand justice for the crimes committed by them and clear guarantees that there will be no potential for future aggression. Russia should also withdraw from all aspects of life in Ukraine, so that Ukrainian society alone, without any pressure or interference, can determine its own future and protect its identity. Priority measures. The renunciation of territorial encroachments and claims against Ukraine and other neighboring countries should be enshrined in the Constitution of the Russian Federation, while the policy of repentance and renunciation of colonial policy should be enshrined at the legislative level. The Russian military doctrine should not consider the Ukrainian state as a potential military target or demand restrictions on Ukraine's sovereign rights, such as joining NATO. The forced acquisition of Russian citizenship by residents of the temporarily occupied territories after 20th February 2014 should be recognized as legally null and void. If any residents of any of the previously temporarily occupied territories wish to retain Russian citizenship, they must officially renounce their Ukrainian citizenship and reacquire their Russian citizenship. The consequences of such actions will lead to the application of general principles in respect of the procedure by which Russian citizens can enter Ukraine and duration of their stay. Illegally adopted children who were deported or abducted during the invasion must be immediately returned to their legal guardians in Ukraine without any bureaucratic demands or delays on the part of Russia. Any court decisions regarding the privatization of parental rights during the period of occupation must be recognized as null and void. Citizens of the Russian Federation who illegally entered Ukraine, including the Autonomous Republic of Crimea after 20 February 2014, must leave the territory of Ukraine independently or with the assistance and financial support of Russian Federation. Citizens of Ukraine persecuted by the Russian Federation on politically motivated ground since 2014 must be released. All prisoners of war must be returned to Ukraine. Moral damages caused by the illegal imprisonment and improper detention of citizens of Ukraine in prison of Russian Federation, including due to torture, should be compensated. Any agreements, ownership rights to movable and immovable property and obligations acquired in violation of the legislation of Ukraine in the temporarily occupied territories after 20th February 2014 should be recognized as null and void. If necessary, new agreements should be executed in line with the legislation currently in force in Ukraine. Any damages incurred by citizens of Ukraine should be paid for by the Russian Federation. Legislation should be passed making it possible for those who have committed war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide against the Ukrainian people to hold any administrative positions in government at all levels. They should be extradited at Ukraine's request or convicted under international jurisdiction. Any interference in the political life of Ukraine by Russian Federation or its citizens should be deemed unacceptable. Russia must return all items and artifacts of historical and cultural value stolen during the occupation of Ukrainian territories and compensate for the loss of those that were destroyed. Furthermore, the policy of any new leadership of the Russian Federation that emerges after the military defeat and represents of the Russian society for crimes should be publicly affirmed by returning the items of historical and cultural value to Ukraine that were taken by the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union or appropriated by the Russian Federation after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The adoption of this plan will also sign that the international community no longer tolerates the Russians' imperial claims to Ukraine as a part of its sphere of influence, thereby creating safeguards against further aggression. Decolonization of Russia and overcoming Russian totalitarianism. There will be no stable and sustainable peace in Europe if it contains a country that in the worst tradition of the Dark Ages has no respect for human rights and doesn't uphold them even with respect to its own citizens. That remains an empire that denies rights to its colonized indigenous and people and other national minorities, that uses the politics of historical memory, NGOs, religion and courts to justify and maintain totalitarian power, that pursues and aggressive foreign policy and expensive militarism instead of guaranteeing its people freedom and other fundamental rights. The Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine has shown the importance of decolonization of Russian Federation and tackling the totalitarian nature of its power structures. To ensure stable and sustainable peace in Europe, Russia must first and foremost bring its constitutional system, social structure and political systems in line with modern-day standards, de facto as well as de jure. This must happen before we can begin any discussion on the normalization of relations with Russia. Firstly, the Constitution of the Russian Federation should be brought in line with the internationally recognized standards stipulated in the recommendations of the Council of Europe and the Venice Commission. Firstly, this Constitution should encompass recognition of the principle of the rule of law, constitutional guarantees of all internationally recognized human rights, establishment of the mechanism by which the colonized indigenous people of the Russian Federation can realize their right to self-determination in accordance with the procedure enshrined in the UN's founding documents. Guarantees of local self-government and consolidation of decentralization based on the principle of subsidiarity. The rights of the regions of the Russian Federation to broad regional self-government, including ownership of sub-oil, the benefits from their exploration and exploitation, and revenues from all economic activities in the region. Genuine parliamentarism and consolidation of political pluralism, democratic standards in electoral and referendum legislation, establishment of an effective system of checks and balance as a safeguard against the return of authoritarian, guarantees of the independence of the justice, recognition of the supremacy of the country's international obligations over domestic legislation. Secondly, the systems in place in Russia should be brought into compliance with its constitution, which requires following: restoration of the federal nature of the state enshrined in the constitution by renewing the federal agreement, restoration of the human rights enshrined in the constitution, granting of freedom to political prisoners, ensuring the safe return of political immigrants, removal of obstacles to participation in the political process for persons represented by Putin's regime, ensuring the freedom to establish and run political parties and their participation in elections, guaranteeing that the elections are held with the participation of international observers and in compliance with all relevant principles. The experience of many countries that have rejected totalitarianism also testifies to the positive impact of abandoning one-person rule, monarch or president, and organizing power structures on the basis of political pluralism and parliamentarism. As long as Russia remains an empire which rules over colonized people without recognizing their right to self-determination and exploits the territories of the regions of the Federation in the interest of the political center and oligarchy, the chances of Russia becoming a democratic, law-based European state are slim to none. This means that colonized and indigenous people, including residents of colonized territories, should be given the political support to express their right to self-determination. As recognized by the UN's founding documents, if this is the clearly expressed will of these people, we should not be afraid of the possible formation of new independent states, but should promote the democratic and peaceful nature of this procedure. In addition, to bring the constitution and legislation in line with civilized standards, we should create the conditions for the transformation of public consciousness from supporting the imperialist aggressive concept of the Ruski Mir to respecting the dignity and freedoms of all nations and people. One tool to drive this process of transformation is illustration, a statutory ban on holding public positions and participating in public life, including teaching and speaking in the media, for 25 years for active participants in Putin's totalitarian regime, which has cultivated hatred towards other people and anti-Western hysteria, revived Russian imperialism, and justified its past crimes, resorting to the illegal use of armed forces in Chechnya, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, and committing crimes of genocide in Ukraine. This includes members of parliament who voted for the aggression against Ukraine, judges of the Constitutional Court of the Russian Federation, who recognized the legitimacy of the annexion of Crimea. Managers, editors, and journalists from political shows on state television channels, the leaders of the Russian Orthodox Church, Muslim clerics, and other religious figures who have promoted and approved the war. Generals of the armed forces and employees of the FSB, members of the government and officials of the Russian presidential administration. The ČK, NKVD, KGB, FSB should be recognized as criminal bodies in order to prevent any future attempts by their employees to seize power. Civilian control of the security sector should be also ensured. The normalization of Russia is impossible without proper humanitarian policy measures. Similarly to the denazification of Hitler's Germany after its defeat, this policy, in the case of Russia, should be focused on its de-Russialization. This by no means implies the prohibition of infringements of Russian identity, language and culture, unlike what the Russian authorities did to Ukrainians and other people, by rather overcoming Russia's identification with Great Rus and the Ruski Mir. This identification contributes to the idea of Russian greatness and resulting state policy, a sense of the historical exceptionalism of Russia as a separate civilization, and territorial claims toward allegedly unhistorical neighboring nations, and attempts to establish a monopoly over their territory. To achieve this goal, we need to condemn the crimes of the Soviet government and Putin's regime against people of the USSR and Europe, equating them to crimes against humanity. Reinstate the work of memorial and other historical institutions involved in the investigations of Soviet crimes. Ensure that the archives of the Soviet and post-Soviet era are public so that historians can use them in their work. Prohibit the use of any sign and symbology related to the mass crimes of the Russian and Soviet authorities. Remove monuments to persons responsible for these crimes and rename towns, squares and streets bearing their names. Radically revise the school, Russian history and literature curriculum and prepare a new generation of school textbooks that condemn rather than justify and glorify the many manifestations of violence committed by Russia in the past. Ensure that the history, language and culture of non-Russian people is taught to all persons residing within their lands. Make knowledge of the local language mandatory to hold administrative positions. Contribute in every way to the revival of the languages and cultures of the indigenous people facing the threat of extension in accordance with international legislation. The imperialization of Russian history would also involve the creation of a national, non-imperial history of Russia itself. Reform and denationalize the media asset of the Russian Federation and publicly supervise their work. Liquidate the Federal Agency for the Commonwealth of Independent States Affairs, compatriots living abroad, and international humanitarian cooperation as a state body that violates the Vienna Convention, serving as a diplomatic cover for special services and intelligence agencies of the Russian Federation. Liquidate the Ruski Mir Foundation as an organization that uses extremist slogans in its activities, such as Russia's borders have no end, which could threaten sustainable peace. Modern Russia, in the result of many centuries of bloody colonial expansion, the destruction of nations, cruel exploitation of people, and suppression of human rights. The long history of oppressions of both its neighbors and its own population has continued unchallenged into the modern era, in which democracy, human rights, and the principles of peaceful coexistence have become the basis of the modern world order, without fundamental changes to its cultural, political, and administrative traditions. Even after it defeats, Russia risks turning into a revanchist state that poses a threat to future generations. That is why Russia must be demilitarized, disarmed, and prevented from starting a new war in Europe. The plans of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation to increase the armed forces to 1.5 million troops in the years 2023-26, the creation of 2 new military districts, Moscow and Leningrad, and new mechanized and artillery divisions, the transformation of airborne and marine brigades into divisions, and the deployment of the army corps on the border. There are several possible countries that could be Russia's next target. Aggression against the Baltic states and Poland is highly probable. Moldova and Romania in the south, Slovakia in the middle, and Finland in the north of NATO's eastern flank may become the next target of Russian aggression, unless the world seizes the momentum to fully demilitarize Russia, while it is weakened by its lost war in Ukraine. It will soon have to deal with a new wave of Russian aggression. This will involve the use of tactical nuclear weapons, because Russia will never be strong enough with conventional weapons alone. Ukraine will always be the first barrier to aggression from the east, and this is why Ukraine should be in NATO. We are not pursuing our future membership only in the context of security guarantees for Ukraine. As a nuclear aggressor state that has attacked a nuclear-free state, threatened to use nuclear weapons, sized nuclear energy facilities risking a large-scale nuclear accident, undermined the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, and accelerated the development of such weapons in threshold. The demilitarization and denuclearization of Russia should be a vital component of the international community response. As a country that has resorted to aggression involving war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocidal practices, Russia should be prohibited from having a military presence outside its national borders, either in the official capacity of the armed forces of the Russian Federation or through private military companies. All military based outside the internationally recognized borders of the Russian Federation should be decommissioned. In order to prevent a new war in Europe, restrictions should be placed on Russia as part of new conventional armed forces and arms control negotiation in Europe. The militarization of the aggressor should include the following: removal of Russia's naval presence in the Azov Sea and Black Sea, creation of the North-South demilitarized zone on the territory of the Russian Federation, from the Baltic Sea to the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, including the Kaliningrad region. Abolishment of private military companies with a ban on their future establishment. As an ally of the aggressor that provided its territory for an attack on Ukraine, Belarus should be also demilitarized. The need to denuclearize Russia is dictated by the unprecedented attack by a nuclear state on a non-nuclear NPT signatory country, which voluntarily gave up its nuclear weapons. Russia has been using energy as a weapon, so its ability to continue to do so should be limited. As one of the key players in the global energy market, Russia has consistently failed to manage the revenues received from the sale of natural resources wisely, and instead of developing the prosperity of its region, the revenues are frittered away due to corruption or spent on destroying the domestic opposition and waging wars against other countries. To be continued.
Так? We are doing, maybe we will do yoga because it's yoga time. So yoga time with the echo bass. Yoga bass. Yoga bass.
Тож усім доброго ранку, гарного сніданку. Це була така собі йога-музика, якщо це можна так назвати. От. В принципі, мене це ввело вже в якийсь напівтрансовий стан, але я думаю, це через те, що я всю ніч не спав. Можна ще синт поклацати. А, ні, не можна. Можна.
Out of commotion, there can be pain as people talking. Yeah, oh, your sex is on fire, and so when the water transpire. Meet you where you've been. I can show you incredible things. Silent magic, having scenes. I'm a queen, baby, I'm not a by God. Look at that face, you look like my ex mixtapes. Life's a game, why never play? So it's gonna be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Come along next to others and tell you I'm insane. I've got blank space, baby, I'll write your name. On fire, console for the water transpire. Yeah, oh, your sex is on fire, console. They're watching out of commotion. They can be pain as people talking. Yeah, oh, your sex is on fire, and so when the water transpire, nice to meet you where you've been. I can show you incredible things, silent magic, having scenes. I'm a queen, baby, I'm not a bad guy. Look at that face, you look like my ex mixtapes. Life's a game, whatever play. So it's gonna be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Come along next others and tell you I'm insane. I've got blank space, baby, I'll write your name. Your sex is on fire. Console for the one I'm transpiring. Yeah, oh, your sex is on fire. Console for the one I'm transpiring. Love where you're lying, don't make a sound. I know they're watching out of commotion. They can be pain as people talking. Yeah, oh, your sex is on fire, and so when the water transpire, nice to meet you where you've been. I can show you incredible things, silent magic, having scenes. I'm a queen, baby, I'm not a bad guy. Look at that face, you look like my ex mixtapes. Life's a game, whatever play. So it's gonna be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Come along next others and tell you I'm insane. I've got blank space, baby, I'll write your name. watching, they're watching. Out of commotion, they can be pain. As people talking, yeah. Oh, your sex is on fire, and so I don't wanna transpire. Nice to meet you, where you've been. I can show you incredible things. Silent magic, having scenes. You're my queen, baby, I'm not a bad guy. Look at that face, you look like my ex mixtapes. Life's a game, why never play? So it's gonna be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Come along next others and tell you I'm insane. I've got blank space, baby, I'll write your name. Your sex is on fire. Consumed for the one I'm transpired. Yeah, oh, your sex is on fire. Consumed for the one I'm transpired. Lower your legging, don't make a sound. I know they're watching, out of commotion, they can be pain. As people talking, yeah. Oh, your sex is on fire, and so I don't wanna transpire. Nice to meet you, where you've been. I can show you incredible things. Silent magic, having scenes. You're my queen, baby, I'm not a bad guy. Look at that face, you look like my ex mixtapes. Life's a game, why never play? So it's gonna be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Come along next others and tell you I'm insane. I've got blank space, baby, I'll write your name. your leggy, don't make a sound. I know they're watching, out of commotion. Look at the pain, people talking. Nice to meet you where you've been. I can show you incredible things. Silent magic, having scenes. I'm a queen, baby, I'm not a by guy. Look at that face, you look like my ex mixtapes. Life's a game, whatever play. So it's gonna be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Come along next others and tell you I'm insane. I've got blank space, baby, I'll write your name. Sound. I know they're watching, out of commotion. They can be pain as people talking. Yeah, your sex is on fire, and so transpire. Nice to meet you where you've been. I can show you incredible things. Silent magic, having scenes. I'm a queen, baby, I'm not a by guy. Look at that face, you look like my ex mixtapes. Life's a game, whatever play. So it's gonna be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Come along next others and tell you I'm insane. I've got blank space, baby, I'll write your name.